Welcome to Parrot's Literary Corner. For the first part of this program, on the show with me today, Dustin Pickering is going to be my co-host. We'll be inviting different writers across the globe, exploring their world and the world around them. So, but today we shall be exploring its own world and the world of poetry generally. Let's just start with poetry. We are poets. Beyond that, we are literary writers. So we'll be dealing with publishing world and the literary world. Specifically, we'll narrow it down to poetry. So welcome to the show, Dustin.
Thank you for inviting me.
We've been in this journey of literary activism for years. And today we shall be extensively going deeply into the exploration of this world together. We've got Wise in, ZM Wise. Welcome to the show. That means with the three of us who will be dealing with this. Welcome.
Thank you very much for having me. Glad to be here.
Interesting. So before we go deeply into the whole show, the entire content of today's show, we will have to know who our guests today are. So I'm going to give them the floor to introduce themselves. And then from there, we'll move on to the publishing world and the poetic world. Let's start with Dustin. Over to you, Dustin.
I am Dustin Pickering. I'm a poet, a critic, and publisher based in Houston, Texas, and I've been publishing since 2010. And basically, I'm also an author of many books of poetry. I've got a little philosophy tract out there called A Matter of Degrees, and our journal is called Harbinger Asylum, and my press is Transcendent Zero Press, which is mostly for poetry. We've also published a novella and some academic criticism books for Kirti Sengupta, the acclaimed Indian writer. So that's pretty much my story. And we started in 2010, and ZM here is my sidearm. He's my loyal companion in the journey.
Thank you so much, Dustin. Wise, over to you, please.
Yes, thank you very much for having me. My name is ZM Wise. I'm an Illinois native from Chicago. I've been with Dustin, his baby, his brainchild, Transcendent Zero Press, for quite some time. He first made me assistant editor on April 2nd of 2011, and that was when we first started Harbinger Asylum together. He saw that we shared the same passion in poetry and in literature, and it's just skyrocketed from there. I'm also the author of several books, mostly poetry. I have one play as well, a play in one act, and my writings and my lyrics and just my songs have been published in many different journals and anthologies all around the world. And yeah, it's great. It's been a wonderful journey.
Thank you so much. I guess our viewers must have heard a little bit information about these great creative minds. I'm not going to call them poets because they are creative. You cannot be into publishing world without having creative mind. So that's why I call them the creative minds. So in a nutshell, let's start with what really inspired you to enter the literary world. Dustin.
Well, I've always had a knack for writing and enjoyed literature. I'm mainly a very idea-centered person, and I do believe that literature is a fine way to create ideas that may not appear to have any practical industrial type use, but they're beautiful, they're interesting, and stories especially keep the human heart alive. They humanize people. Poetry, I think it's spontaneous action and language, and I think it keeps the language and mythos of a people alive. And it's a cultural activity, and I really had a knack at a young age for writing stories and poetry, and I've always gone back to that. It's a very impulsive thing for me to go back to poetry and writing, and since I was a kid. And I think my main the main catalyst for me to get involved in writing in general, for me to decide to be a writer, was when I was a sophomore in high school. And that's when I first became interested in Sylvia Plath. And Sylvia Plath's poetry just was such a different experience for me. And I went from there to poetry by Leonard Cohen. I even got into cultural figures like Bob Dylan, and enjoyed reading a lot, and as I had since I was a kid. And I think that's pretty much the reason why I entered the world of literature, was mainly because I had the ability to do so, and I knew I wasn't going to just have Norton, as I keep saying, like Norton's not just going to knock on my door and come to me and say, okay, can we publish your book? So I decided I want to put the groundwork in myself. And a lot of poets, especially, start off with their own literary journals. Octavio Paz, for instance, had one when he was 12 years old, and he worked with writers all across the globe. And so that's pretty much my general spirit of my mind in that regard.
How about you, wife? What inspired you to join the literary world?
Well, since I was a very young lad, I always enjoyed reading. And in 1995, I was about 5-6 years old when I wrote my first piece. It was an observational piece about just someone being born. This was I often say that I take the imagination of a child and sort of compare it to surrealist poetry, and I see no difference. And
I guess we've lost your voice. I don't know if you can hear us. I think something is wrong with your speaker from there. So we'll get back to you while you're trying to fix that. Dustin, I want us to look at before we get to the Harbinger Asylum. Poetry is an aspect of literature that most people see as very challenging to write. Not only to write, but very difficult to even comprehend. Do you believe in this kind of opinion, or what's your own view towards poetry?
I think poetry is the most challenging of the literary arts, because it kind of has an obscure quality to it sometimes, and sometimes it's not so obscure. Sometimes people write very common man oriented language that is easy to read. It's easy to comprehend. Anybody, can read it. And as far as it being challenging to write, for me, it always came naturally. And so I never really felt challenged by it. It was like an impulse. And I believe the writer George Orwell said that writers write because, quote unquote, some demon made them do it. And that's kind of how it feels. Sometimes there's just like this generated energy that just fills you, and it comes straight from your heart. And it just, for me, that there's that fire that goes within your body that says, you must write. There's always that impulse of, like the prophets had to feel God going through them to communicate with their people. It's like a very both sensual and spiritual thing. And I think that writing is a calling that maybe why it's so difficult for so many people. But I think it's a very necessary activity, culturally speaking, and for the human race, because it's part of what unites people. It's part of what generates values and helps the world move forward in those terms. And I do believe strongly that even though it's not really highly regarded in the popular mindset, that poetry is one of the most important art forms especially in the literary arts.
Thank you. Let's now talk about the Harbinger Asylum, your publishing house. You've been into this for several years with your partner, wife, wife, and you must have had a lot of ups and downs along this journey. Tell us a little bit about this
Yes.
publishing house and some
The
of the
publishing house
challenges
is
you faced along the line, how you've been managing to cope with them.
The publishing house is Transcend Zero Press, and the literary journal is Harbinger Asylum. And one of the main challenges we faced has been financial things, because it just doesn't make much money. We've had to finance a lot of things, through different events we've done. The beauty of that being, I've been able to bring people together in different quarters. Like we used to work with Last Concert Cafe here in Houston, and they were wonderful to us. We would bring bands together, and that was always a very lively experience and a wonderful experience. And I felt that that's the main thing that I enjoy about writing and being involved in the publishing business, is learning to meet new people and challenge my own, sort of homebody, lifestyle. I'm kind of like, sort of an isolated person sometimes. And it took me a lot of my personal challenge was getting out and meeting new people. And I, wasn't ever sure when I began how a literary journal would go about being created, and I learned gradually over time. And so that was another challenge, was learning from scratch just how to do this. So I just want to note that absolutely anybody that wants to start a literary journal could do it. It just takes a little time to learn. And a good community of people, even if it's a small community, can make a huge difference in the world. And to me, those are the main things that I faced, is learning to deal with community and work with community, as well as the financial side, which is always a problem with anything. But we've managed to pull together pretty well, and with the help of the large community at large. So that's been a wonderful experience in general, is meeting new people and all kinds of interesting people from different walks of life, learning more about international cultures and what's going on politically and socially in different countries. It's been a very wonderful thing to create literature and to broaden people's minds and thinking processes. And it's been quite a journey.
While we're still waiting for Wise, because I would have loved to ask him this question, since it's your partner. Very good, he's back. Thank you.
I'm sorry, I'm terribly sorry, I didn't get to finish my, the origins. It's this device I'm using. It'll freeze on occasion, so my apologies.
It's no problem. Yeah, I actually wanted to go deeply into this aspect of Harbinger Asylum and talking about your publishing house. He has talked about some of the challenges you face, and how you've been managing to cope with these challenges, and how you've been driving through these challenges. But I actually want to know the processes that you put in place to ensure that you have very standard content in your work.
Yeah, so we're not demigods, of course. We're going to seek what we deem high quality work. And it's usually a split decision between Dustin and I, but I trust his judgment
as well.
I trust his judgment, he trusts mine, and Studi, of course, who is fairly new to the game. And so we'll pretty much decide after the selection process. And so I'm sorry, I think Dustin pretty much said it all. I don't think I have to answer this.
Okay, beyond selection, what else do you, what next after you've gotten the content from the writers and then you identify the publishing ones and non-publishing ones? What next do you do? I want you to take us through until you get to the publication stage, the final stage of the publication.
Mhm. Yeah. So So after the selection process, we'll place them in a certain order. I'll usually edit, and Studio will help with that as well. And after letting them know they've been selected, of course, then we'll place the journal on Amazon, and it's been very helpful to us in a great deal of ways. It's a shame that CreateSpace has gone out the window, unfortunately, but we will sometimes give out contributor copies to certain authors. Sometimes they would request for them and whatnot, but whenever we were at events before COVID, of course, they were widely distributed, and we were able to access them more. We usually sell more by hand anyway, instead of Amazon, which, I mean, the royalties are what I call peanuts. So I mean, it's better than nothing, no complaints, but
Right.
those are just the facts. Whether we're selling our own volumes of poetry by hand or the journal Harbinger Asylum, that's how it works.
Dustin,
also
do you have
take
anything to
subscriptions.
say on this? If there's anything you need to add to this?
No, I don't think so. Like I said, I think Dustin provided a great explanation. I think anything I say would be gratuitous at this point.
Yeah, I'm
We do
addressing
have a
Dustin
website.
this time, right? Dustin, I want you to tell us exactly what are the areas you find very challenging during the selection or publishing processes, you know? And for every stage, they must have certain challenge that to face. Which part of this is, would you say, as the most difficult part? And how have you been sailing through all these years? You talk about starting this establishment in 2011, right?
Yes.
And up to now, that's going to be like 10 years ago, complete 10 years ago. That's a long time, a decade. You shall have anniversary and invite the whole world, you know, to celebrate with you. So this I guess this is the beginning of the celebration anyway. So for us to have
Right.
got this platform to, because this, if you are watching us for the first time, we're dealing with Harbinger Asylum, a publishing house in the United States, Texas, California, right? So these are the base of the backbone of the publishing house. So in a nutshell, what I'm now addressing Dustin. What are some of the challenges that you feel are the key parts of the publishing process?
Well, I think for me, what I enjoy doing is balancing diverse aesthetics, diverse ideas. And I mean, I hate to say it, I know a lot of people in the literary community are very politically liberal, and I respect that. And I think that also we try to put some conservative voices into the journal on different subjects. And I love doing the balancing act. And I find that, that's a good approach for me. It works for me, for my publishing company, is trying to present a lot of variety in approaches. And sometimes it's hard to find people with differing varieties like that. There seems to be quite a consensus amongst artists that you're pretty liberal these days, and that's great. We want progressive-minded people out there. We also want stability and foundational people who believe in tradition and respect that. So I like to try to balance the differing perspectives, and I think that the conservative liberal thing also goes into the aesthetics, not just political beliefs, but some people believe more in traditional styles or formal poetry versus the avant-garde or the the new-founded social justice stuff that's out there that's challenging the world at large, which is really a wonderful thing to see so many differing, it's a great flowering of literature out there, and I believe strongly in diversity of opinion. It's sometimes very hard to balance amongst a general population, a good set of ideas. But other than that, I mean, we get a lot of submissions. We get a lot of people from all over the world on different topics, and we present our guidelines on our webpage, which is transcendentzeropress.org, and there's a submission guidelines there. And we consider ourselves to be sort of a communal activity, which we want to bring people together sometimes that may not actually get along or not think the same. And that's a fun thing to do, is to be a mediator culturally between differing groups of people.
Yeah, Wise. How would you say you usually manage to cope with difficult writers? There are reasonable writers, and sometimes you have very difficult ones. As publishers, there's no way you can avoid them. Within your 10 years of experience, you must have met some of these very, very difficult writers. How do you manage them?
Oh, I could tell you stories, Moshe. Yeah, sometimes Dustin and I will just reminisce about how we've dealt with them.
Politely, usually we try.
But politely, no. Here's the thing: we're as professional as possible. Obviously, we're not going to risk losing our volcanic temper over difficult writers and possibly place our reputation in jeopardy. We don't seek to do that whatsoever. We handle them as politely as possible, as professional as possible. If for some reason they start raising a ruckus, then it depends on, it's entirely situational in my opinion. It depends on the issue that they're having. Sometimes a person won't take rejection well. And one of my favorite tips is, as far as receiving a rejection notice from a publisher, do not write back. Just don't. Trust yourself enough to just accept the rejection and move forward. Poets and writers actually suggested that in one of their issues, is just don't write back to someone who's rejecting you. So I think it's a great piece of advice. So but it's been interesting. It keeps the publishing world interesting. I welcome difficult writers. We need those challenges, and we need hilarious stories. So
Dustin, I want you to tell us about certain experience you've had that you can never forget regarding a difficult writer.
Oh gosh, I don't want to name anybody specifically, but I think one of the most interesting stories was a guy submitted, and then I turned his piece down, or his pieces down, and he wrote back and said, I just went back to your site and looked over your stuff, and your journal isn't my flavor of tap water anyway. And I was just kind of like, I said, okay, well, I said, well, you don't have to submit it again if you don't want to submit again. And then he started kind of like attacking me on Facebook on a political post I made, and I just politely blocked him. I just thought it was silly. He was being kind of rude about it. He wasn't really being, conversational, and I just felt like, it's not worth my time. Some people are just, strange, I guess. And I did have a writer that submitted a manuscript, and I'll take the blame of this on myself. I was kind of rude to him when I responded. And I told him, he said that he felt his manuscript was very original and had some insights. And I responded, I'm just not seeing the insights here. And it was kind of rude for me to do that. And he got really, really angry at me and just kind of belittled me. And I just politely said, well, how about this? How about you publish it in another company and come back and tell me how great your sales are, and then I'll totally respect you. And he did. He actually sent me a promotional email later on, and I was perfectly happy with it. I was like, great, I'm happy for you. You know, when he got it published, he sent me a promotional email for the book, and I congratulated him. So, you know, I take that kind of I guess doom on myself. So that was a really funny story behind that one.
You know, human beings generally do not like rejection, but rejection is
Right.
part of human life. It's
Yes,
Hmm.
there's no way
exactly.
you can
Absolutely.
just avoid that. It should be something you should take as part of the experience of your life. If you are not rejected, you cannot appreciate yourself more. So the more you get rejected, the more you assess yourself. That's what I tell people. That you are rejected today does not mean that you'll be rejected forever. You just need to check yourself. You need to be examined by an external. You can't just say you are self-sufficient and then whatever you do is ultimate and is the best. So that means you are a failure if you start having that kind of thoughts.
Right.
Some writers are like that, especially egocentric writers. You know, so some of them are pumpers. They believe in themselves. They believe that whatever they do is the best, nothing else. So if you bring anything contrary to their own worldview, instead of them to think deeply and look at your angle of observation, they believe in whatever worldview that they have within themselves. That is like sending yourself to a wrong direction if you have that kind of mindset. So it's not good to have such a thing. So
Probably before the fall.
beyond this aspect of publishing, now let's look at why you choose to be publishing more poetry than any other aspect of genres of literature. Why?
Personally, for me, it's endless. It's limitless. There are just countless possibilities. I suppose technically you could say this about any genre of writing, but to me anyway, it's the most thought-provoking. Of course, if the writer allows that. But I think it resonates with me the most. You can concoct so many different possibilities from that single genre of writing. You can something that Dustin and I do on our own is we even turn our pieces of poetry into songs and actually sing and record them. I love how they sort of combine into that other spectrum. But yeah, I think it's mainly that, and um, at the root of creation, there's nothing like it. There's just nothing like it. That's how I feel.
Yeah, Dustin, what's your view about this? What do you have to say?
I like poetry because I feel like it's a spontaneous mental combustion. As ZM has said, you know, about creativity and how this is like the illuminating aspect of literature, and how it's you know, the most creative and spontaneous form of literature. And for me, I like spontaneous. I kind of have a spontaneous personality, and you can be any kind of personality, I think, and put your heart into a poem and tell your story, or to, you know, put out in good faith what you believe to be true. And I think that that's a very important thing. And poetry is very, very easy to write in terms of, like, you can just have a notebook and just jot it down, and you know, you've got it down as a snapshot of your mind in that period. And I think that's a wonderful aspect of poetry. With a novel, perhaps not so much. It's not a snapshot of your mind. It's a storytelling, or a, you know, it's a very long-winded exploration of you know, somebody's life, or you know, a storyline that you want to follow, and it's a little more regimented. And poetry is more like a snapshot of the mind. It's very impressionistic, and you know, you can just unlimited possibilities as to how you can present your mind in those capacities. And it's very mysterious too. It's, you know, there's a cornerstone of literature. I think poetry brings things into being because it's spontaneous. It's completely original and highly beautiful art form.
It's a literary labyrinth.
Wise,
There's a
what
good
do you
there.
have to say about this? Some people say that lazy writers, I mean, lazy publishers prefer to publish poetry because there's nothing much to edit in poetry because it's personal. Most of the poets usually have their own reason for using specific word in their writing, and because of poetic license, it makes it easy for poet to say, "This is my way." So it makes it easier also for publisher to publish without stressing themselves, considering grammar, vocabulary, syntax, pragmatics, stylistics, semiotics, etc. So what do you have to say about this?
Um, that's actually part of the reason why I like editing poetry, because it provides that much more of a challenge. If it's prose, it's much more concrete. You can easily spot the errors, but there are many poets who will purposely spell something wrong. They will create a fragment of a sentence a certain way that doesn't seem, I guess, as orthodox to the human eye as one would experience on a daily basis. But I think, again, I would have to say it's situational, because I think some might genuinely miss the point of what they're attempting to convey, and I think the other half, it's done with intention, and it could add to their version of a concrete message. But it can be subjective, as art in general is.
Do you have anything to say, Dustin, with regards to all poetry publishers lazier than those publishing other genres of literature, or you feel that's a very wrong impression?
For speaking and from my own experience as a poet and a publisher of poetry, I would say, yeah, I feel like that. One thing I'm doing now to sort of illuminate or to take forward what ZM was saying concerning poetic license, I'm collecting some quotes on the on art, beauty, truth, and liberty, and how all of these different things are sort of interacting. And it's a fun little experiment I'm doing. I've been collecting them for some years. I've got about 10 pages of quotes now from everybody from James Madison to Henry Miller. So I think that it's very important to understand the nature of truth and beauty, as Keats has said, truth and, concerning truth and beauty. But it's very hard to say, what is truth? I mean, what is it? As Pilate said, Pilate, as he announced to the crowd, crucifying Jesus, he said, well, what is truth? What is truth? I mean, what is it? So it's an angle, somebody may see two different, a person may see this, another person may see that, it's the same object in question, but maybe somebody's seeing an aspect that is not there to the other person, and maybe that other person is blindsided. And so you have this conversation going on amongst poetry, that's speaking of the general nature of reality. And so I think that's a very powerful thing to question. And, you're questioning reality. It's almost like science in a way. Literature can be very scientific in a certain respect. I've made that point a few times and some of my essays, especially regarding Kirti Sengupta. I have a couple of essays on him that I talk about the way science and literature sort of interact. And that's one way, I think, through the challenging of consensus.
Great. Wise, I'm about to round up this session, but it will be unfair if we fail to discuss this part, which has to do with the inauguration day. I mean, Biden's inauguration day. The poets invited to present on that day. Some people say her presentation ignites the interest of people, not only in the States, but across the globe. What do you have to say about this?
I'm so sorry. Could you repeat that once more? You were kind of blinking.
Some people believe that the poet invited on Biden's President Biden's inauguration
Oh,
day.
mhm.
Our presentation ignites interest of people within the United States and beyond. What do you have to say
Mhm.
about this?
I've actually, I'm so glad you asked. I've been waiting to speak about Amanda Gorman's poem. Um, so personally, when I saw it, I thought the presentation was, it was nothing short of spellbinding. I liked gathering views of both sides, like some who saw it as just as spellbinding, others saw it as just rubbish. I mean, because everybody, of course, has their own opinion of not only the presentation but the piece, the content itself. And I mean, I haven't seen anything like it before. Um, it truly stunned me, and to watch that live performance as she was giving it. I mean, she's known for creating pieces for certain occasions. This is not her first her first rodeo, as they say. Um, yeah, I thought her delivery was wonderful, and every syllable of that poem resonated uh, throughout. And yeah, I definitely enjoyed that. Sometimes I'll read it just over and over. Sometimes it'll carry a new meaning, and like most pieces do. Most of it is straightforward, but there are certain parts that are more subjective. Um, yeah, I was deeply moved by Amanda Gorman's poem. She has me hooked.
White has just said something now that that's I'm about to just ask Dustin. Should poetry be subjective or should poetry be flexible? You know, some people write, they believe that it should be complex. People should think deeply before they can understand it. And some believe that poetry should not be too difficult for people to understand because the message is the most important thing, according to semanticians. So what do you have to say about this, Dustin?
Oh,
I like complex poetry myself as a personal, because I think I'm deep natured and I like to think deeply and reflect. I'm very introverted as well. But in general, you said, it's both ways. It's either or. I mean, some people like the direct message, the sensuous poetry. Some people prefer a more liberating, spontaneous, thoughtful presentation and reading what they read. And it just varies, I guess, between the nature of the person and what they want to actually communicate.
All right, as we are planning to round up this party, I would want you to tell us if any of our writers across the globe will want to contact you. What are some of the processes that they need to? What kind of work do you accept? Have you moved from poetry to other forms, or you still restrict yourself to poetry? What message do you have for writers across the globe who are interested in publishing their work with you?
We do mostly poetry, but we're wanting to expand to doing possibly novels in the near future. We want to do ebooks, novels that are formatted from ebooks. And this is something I announced recently concerning the sort of rebranding of TZ Press. We're known for poetry, but we do want to expand into other branches of literature. Anybody can contact us at editor@transcendentzeropress.org if they want to submit poetry or just any general inquiries concerning, what we're about or anything of that nature.
I think we have tried as much as we can to explore the world of the Harbinger Asylum and poetry generally. Thank you so much, Wise. Thank you, Dustin. If you have
Thank
any
you.
message for
thank
our
you.
viewers, please send your message, your final message to our viewers, Wise and Dustin.
Dustin, you want
Keep it alive. And I'll let ZM do his trademark.
to?
You know what I mean?
Yeah, I know what he means. I know exactly what he means. No, just keep at it. Whatever your source of creation may be, let nothing stop you. Let no words of rejection cease your gift. It's like no other. And of course, poetry lives. Long live the arts.
Poetry lives.
Thank you so
Rock on.
much. We, viewers at home, this is Parrot Literary Corner. In partnership with Harbinger Asylum, which will be doing a lot of work. From now onward, we'll be inviting writers across the globe, and you'll be seeing these faces again and again as we celebrate the literary minds from different parts of the world. Thank you, Harbinger Asylum founders and publishers. Thank you.